All right, everybody, welcome. It is Tuesday night. It is 7 o'clock, and it is time for another Conversations with Commodores. And I know you guys recognize this fine gentleman right here. Of course, we've got Todd Yoder as our guest tonight. Todd, thank you for making some time for us. It's nice to meet you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation tonight.
I really appreciate you having me on. Excited to kind of talk some old school Vanderbilt football.
Well, that's right. Well, guys, I know most of you know who Todd is. He's been he recently, or in the last couple of years, he was recognized as one of the top 100 Commodores. But so much more. He burst on the scene in '96, and gosh, we got so much to get after. But Todd, let's talk about life growing up in Indiana. What was life like, and what kind of sports were you drawn to as a youngster?
Well, obviously being, from Indiana, basketball was, even a bigger sport than football for us growing up. I had an older brother that ended up playing college basketball. So I was a very good basketball player, coming out of high school. Had offers to actually go play basketball as well. Ran track, played baseball, just kind of, did it all. But football really was my passion. I was always drawn to it, even as a younger, at a younger age. So, we grew up in a real small town. I was actually the first kid out of my high school to ever go Division 1, actually in any sport. We
Oh,
had a
wow.
couple kids go Division 2, maybe some smaller schools. But my high school was very small. My graduating class might have had 100 kids in it. So it was one of those kind of towns where everybody, everybody's name. Now it's kind of grown up a little bit, but back when I was there, we felt like we were cool when they changed the one four-way stop sign to like a flasher. It wasn't like a real stoplight yet, but
That's right. That's
that's
right.
when you hit the map. It was a very small, kind of small community, and just when I was getting recruited, uh, Vanderbilt was interested. And growing up in the Midwest, I've been to many Big Ten football games, and a lot of the Big Ten schools were the only kind of schools that were recruiting me at the time. And I went down to Vandy. Vandy played Alabama at home, and that was like my recruiting game that I went to. And just to feel the kind of difference in the stadium, and just the everything was just a little different. Being in Nashville, it was a little, just a different town. So I naturally, with the academics and with everything, was drawn to Vanderbilt, and kind of made my decision, to go play there.
It's interesting you mentioned that was your recruiting visit. If it was in the season, if it was in '95, that was number 11 ranked Alabama, and it was a narrow loss by us,
Yeah.
33 to 25. So that must have made a impression on you.
No, it did. I want to say in that game, um, Vanderbilt had a little running back. I think it was JJ or Johnson. I mean, he was fast as can be, and he broke a long run, and just the stadium went crazy, and just to be a part of that environment, kind of helped swing my mind as to this is a school I definitely want to come play for.
And did you take an official recruiting visit after that?
Yeah, that was in more towards back then. The recruiting visits were till we were in basketball season when I was back home. So I remember flying down, and the weather was not great on the flight, and I was on a smaller type plane, and coming from a kid that really didn't fly much at that point, it was a bumpy ride. So my dad was like, "How was the flight?" I was like, "I don't know if I want to do this." So kind of made it easy to decide to drive, back and forth from school as opposed to fly. So was kind of blessed that I had a vehicle. So when I would make my commutes, and really even with Nashville for me, it was probably about a 6-hour drive from my house. So it was kind of just far enough to keep my mom from wanting to come every weekend. But still close enough to home where if I really needed to go back and go home for something, I could do the drive, very easily.
That's so funny that you say that. I'm from South Alabama, and my drive was probably 30 minutes longer than yours.
Mhm.
But the tipping point was that it was just far enough that my mom would not just show up.
Yep.
That's so funny. Todd, OJ Fleming says to tell you hello, and the running back you're thinking of was Jermaine Johnson.
Yeah, JJ. Yeah, yeah. What's up, LJ? Howdy. Good seeing you.
So you come down for your recruiting visit, and I have to preface this by saying the statute of limitations. I've checked with our Tennessee lawyers in the group.
Mhm.
Statute of limitations have run on anything you may or may not have ever done, and you're welcome to share anything or not share about what was the impression about that visit, if you remembered the visit, other than the questionable flight. Was it? Do you remember who your hosts were? Did they take you to fun parties? Is there anything of impression that still sticks with you?
To be honest with you, my visit was a little different because I was actually so dedicated to my basketball team my senior year that I kind of came on my visit was actually during the week. So
Mhm.
I flew down on because we played basketball back home. We played Friday, Saturday night, every Friday and Saturday. And I told my basketball coach I won't miss a game. So I actually flew down on a late Sunday night and did like a Monday, Tuesday visit. So I was
Wow.
actually the only kid on campus when I visited.
I was going
Um,
to say, you're like, what are you doing here?
yeah, exactly. People are like, we had everybody here on Saturday. What are you
Yeah.
doing on Monday? So needless to say, the nightlife wasn't as lively on a Monday night. Um, but it was still a good time. I had so it was High Lewis and a couple other guys that took me out. But it was a good time. I mean, we had fun. At that point, I mean, I want to say already made up my mind that this is kind of where I wanted to go. But I kind of narrowed it down to my final choice was Illinois and Vanderbilt. Was kind of where I was, bringing it down to. And once I got down to Vanderbilt, I called the coach once I flew back home and talked to my parents and told them that that's where I was going to go.
Did you ever let on to your mom at the time it was based on the distance the campuses were from home?
Oh,
Illinois.
absolutely not. It was all about the academics, you
Of
know?
course, of course.
Yeah,
That's the
exactly.
official company line, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Guys, I've got Todd Yoder, who played with us in the late 90s and then went on to have a successful professional career, but we're not there yet. We're barely getting to campus. At the time, it was Dowhauer was the coach, but were you being recruited by the previous coach? Were you being recruited by, was it Johnson, or I'm not sure who was the coach? No, not Johnson. I'm so Donardo, or was it Dowhauer? And I know Dowhauer was only there for your freshman season. What was that like? That transition of regimes?
So Dahauer was there, I think, the year even before, and then so I think he was only there for the 2 years. But he
Yeah,
was
95 and 96. You're right.
right. So he was the driving force, in the recruitment process. And
Mhm.
the guy that was in our area, there's a linebacker coach and defensive coordinator. We had Norm Parker.
Mhm.
Um, so
Mhm.
he's the one that kind of actively recruited me. And coming out of really a small school, I was 6'5", maybe 190 pounds coming out. Um, so I think a lot of people didn't really know what to do with me. Um, and what I mean by that is, I played safety on defense, transitioned to playing like a little bit of outside linebacker my senior year. All the Big Ten schools saw me as a outside linebacker with my length. They figure, oh, we'll put some weight on him. He'll transition to like that strong safety hybrid outside linebacker. Vanderbilt was actually the only school that actively recruited me on offense, and I came from actually a wishbone, offense, and I was a left halfback. So for Vanderbilt to look at me and say, "Hey, this kid's going to play receiver,"
Mhm.
I think it was a little bit of a stretch. It was a little bit of a reach. But Coach Parker came and actually saw one of my basketball games my junior year, and said, "Listen, kid, you can jump through the gym. the way that you handle the ball, grabbing it one-handed and doing all that I was doing. And as a sophomore, believe it or not, I wasn't a starting tailback on offense as a sophomore in high school. I actually played receiver. So I had a couple, I had some limited film of, maybe 15 or 16 catches. So I think they just saw enough that they felt like, hey, in this overall athleticism that he has, this kid can do, what we need him to do. And I think it helped too with track. I ran hurdles, I high jumped, I long jumped. I ran the 200, the 400, you name it. I went to the state finals in 4 of those events as a senior. So I think they just kind of thought like this transition coming in. And we had some pretty highly touted receivers in that recruiting class. We had Tavares Hogans, Andre Wood, Zach Linkler, Billy Miller. And some of these kids, they had 1,000 yards receiving seasons. And I think I had 3 catches my senior year. So really going into it, I mean, I'm probably, I was probably the last receiver on the depth chart going into really like summer workouts and or summer football. So I think I probably shocked a lot of people. When I kind of showed up out of nowhere and people are like, where'd they get this kid from?
Well, I'm sure you did. Coming out of Indiana, where there's not a lot of passing, as you said, you guys ran the ball, wishbone. I wanted to comment to you to see, you had mentioned that the Coach Parker had seen you play basketball your junior year.
Yeah.
That seems to be a common thread of multi-sport athletes being recruited, regardless of whatever your sport is. They love to see your feet work, whether it's in basketball, whether it's in track, and you could be playing a whole different sport. But apparently you must have shown something in your coordination of your hand-eye coordination, I guess.
Yeah, well, it just happened. So happened that he came to the game. I think I scored like 35 points and had a couple dunks on some kids. So I really picked a good game to kind of show
no kidding.
him out. So
no kidding. Now, when you get to Vanderbilt and you're starting to compare your abilities with the older guys in the receiving room, as well as the guys who came in your recruiting class, did at any point your confidence as an athlete kind of waver a little bit, or did you just buckle down and say, all right, now I know what my competition is here. I know what I got to go do.
right. Well, I mean, if we talk about funny little stories or just stuff that kind of pops to mind right now, a couple of funny stories to me that, going into that summer or that leading into that first year. So they had asked some of us to come in early for summer workouts, and they kind of set us up with a couple older players to live with them, and then got us like summer jobs to come down to school. And I remember driving down, had my car loaded up, and my dad followed me down. And back then there was no GPS or no cell phone. So we got to the facility, and they give you like a hand-drawn map of, hey, here's your roommates, here's where they live, they're expecting you. Like, okay. So, we get a little MapQuest thing or a printout or, whatever it was back then. And we drive up, and they pair me with Anthony Jordan, who was an outside linebacker, Carlton Hall, who was a great linebacker, and then Big Marcus. And of course, my dad had never really, I think, seen how big and muscular and just, because even when we were there on our visit, it's not like you see the guys with their shirts off or you see,
Right.
how, face to face, how big these guys are. So I remember walking up, knocking on the door, and Big Marcus answers the door, and he was probably 6'5", 6'6", or at least at the time seemed like that, and just jacked up, like no shirt on. And he was like, "What's up, rookie?" or whatever. Yeah. And I was like, "Hey, what's up?" He's like, "Yeah, we're expecting you." And he points in the kitchen corner, and they got a little twin mattress in the kitchen over there. He goes, "That's where you sleep." was like, all right, go down and get my stuff. So we're walking to the car, and by that time, Carlton and AJ came out. I think AJ was wearing like one of those little skimpy little tank top things, just 2% body fat. And
Yeah.
my dad looks at me and he goes, "You sure you want to do this?" And I was like, well, "Which part? Like, go to college, go play football?" I just think he kind of looked at me thinking like, my skinny little 190-pound son has to go against that every day. He's going to die. He's literally probably going to get his head ripped off. And I looked at him and said, "Dad, I'm like, I got this. Don't worry about it."
Oh,
So
wow.
I unload my stuff and put it in, we, start working out and doing our thing. And early on in summer, I didn't really get any good looks or kind of any, every once in a while they might toss me in to run a route, or we're kind of doing some summer stuff. But I finally remember, and this might be the one quote catch that was getting referred to. So we finally kind of I get in a couple plays, and I come across the middle, and it was a deep in cut, probably 15 or 16 yards deep, right into the middle of the defense. And quarterback, in typical Vanderbilt style, throws a horrible ball. I mean, the thing was probably 4 foot above my head and almost behind me, and I'm running full speed this way, and I just sky up probably, and it seemed like, as high as I could physically jump, reach back and kind of pluck it out of the air, catch it, kind of run out of it, and everybody kind of like stops, like, what in the heck? What was that? Like, what happened? And I kind of jog back to the huddle, and everybody's still looking at me like, we haven't seen that in a while here. Kind of, So, and I remember a couple of the DBs at the time. Corey Chavis was one of them, who obviously is an amazing player for Vanderbilt, but then went on to a great NFL career. He kind of pulls me aside. He goes, Can you do that all the time here?" I was like, "Well, yeah, that's why I'm here." I'm like, "Just throw me the ball more, and I'll do it." And he was like, "All right." He's like, "If you can do that," he's like, you're going to play here." And I thought like play here meant like maybe my junior year or senior year, I finally get a chance to play. Which for me, I'm excited. I'm like, "All right, cool. I got a guy that's going to be an All-American telling me that I got a chance to play here." Unbeknownst to me, that I'd end up starting as a true freshman, very early in training camp. And that was kind of, I think, the humble or naive part of me of maybe not recognizing that I had kind of that talent, at least just yet. But yeah, when we led into the our first game, we played Notre Dame on Thursday Night Football, which kind of set the stage for me. And it's amazing that really my first big play as a Vanderbilt Commodore is probably the play that everybody remembers me by. I mean, nobody remembers all the other stuff, but everybody remembers that Notre Dame catch. So,
Todd, you make that catch, and I'm with a bunch of my former teammates, and we're just like, who in the heck is that guy? And where have they been hiding him? And then obviously we go look you up. Oh, he's only been on campus 3 weeks or whatever it was. We got to pause for just a second. Awesome. What you did was you just took your basketball skills and put it on the football field for that catch at practice. Alfonso Harvey says to tell you hello, and he says, Chili Bone. Was that whose nickname was Chili Bone?
I mean, I think what's funny about that is I had so many different nicknames. And I want to say that, really Yo-Yo was the one that everybody kind of knew me by, in college. And it was it was so much good times just with those guys, and being in that environment.
Hey, when you're given a nickname, that means you've been welcomed into the crew.
Right, exactly.
Ladarius Banks, Joe Peebles, Brian Gruber, T. Banks, Mark Matlock, and T. Banks says, the guy that made me realize I wasn't going to the league. Well, Todd, I guess we can get to that Notre Dame game, but when did you learn you were starting, and how many out of Indiana from the Yoder family and friends made that drive?
So to be honest with you, just my parents, because I really, my dad asked me, he's like, "Are you getting plays in practice?" And I was like, "Yeah, they're rotating me in." And at the time, I didn't really, because I'm a freshman, I didn't know I was going to start, or mentally just didn't. I figured, hey, they're going to start a senior and maybe throw me in some, or put me in. So literally the night before the game, coach pulls me aside. He say, "Hey, I'm going to start you tomorrow." And I'm like, "Start me in like the third quarter?" Or like, no, it's like, "No, you're starting. You're gonna play. You're gonna play." Um, so I called my dad and I was like, "You're not gonna believe this, but I'm actually starting tomorrow." And so it was kind of a revelation the night before. And I don't know if they did that maybe to maybe not get too nervous or whatever, because being from Indiana, you grew up watching Notre Dame football. You
Sure.
know,
Sure.
you Lou Holtz is their coach at the time, and some of the players they had, in high school, I watched those guys play, and it's like, uh, to be on that same field. I remember coming out of our little tunnel down there, seeing some of those guys run by, thinking like, "Wow, this is really happening." Um, and really, the funny thing about that game, or a couple little ironic things that I remember. They actually threw the ball to me probably early second quarter-ish. And it was literally just a simple little slant route. And the first ball that I had thrown at me, I dropped it. I literally kind of pulled my head and was looking to run with it before I caught it. And I dropped the ball, and it would have been a 5 or 7 yard completion. Um, but after I dropped that one, we went over to the bench, and back then they had the old school landline that they would call down from the press box. And if coach wanted to talk to you, we nicknamed it the pizza phone, because you'd be like, "Hey man, let me get a pepperoni pizza." But they'd be like, "Hey, coach wants to talk to you on the pizza phone over there." I was like, "All right." So I'm thinking he's going to tell me, "All right, you're on the bench. This stage is too big, or this, we're going to sub somebody else in." And he kind of calmed me down. He's like, "Listen," he goes, "you're starting for a reason. Calm down." He goes, "At some point, you're going to be able to make a catch, in this game." And we get to the third quarter, start of the fourth, and defense is amazing that year. I mean, to hold Notre Dame to 6 points at that time, 2 field goals, and offense is going 3 and out left and right. Thank goodness we had an amazing punter back then. So we 3 and out, punt them, pin them deep. Defense would stop them, and finally, we get a turnover down in the red zone, and I'm thinking like, all right, we actually have a chance to score. And then, the succession went, we had, I think, a penalty, had lost some yardage, had a holding call, however it transpires. But, we get in the huddle, and it's, I think, 3rd and 37, and we're backed up all the way to the 50-yard line. And I remember when they called the play, it was 989 New York, which is basically everybody go downtown, go deep. And at the time, Notre Dame had an All-American cornerback, Allen Rossum, who played in the league, forever, and he was covering me, all game. But he's only 5'7". So we get in the huddle. I looked at the quarterback and I said, "Hey," I go, "if you got a chance, just throw one up to me," kind of saying like he's only 5'7". So we snap it. He's dropping back, and I'm just running as fast as I could possibly run. And when I finally at one point look up and realize, like, it's like one of those things you kind of have to do a double take, like, "Oh crap, he actually threw the ball over here." And you're thinking like, "All right, I gotta try to get under this thing, or do what I did." And to go up, all I really remember about the play, because everybody asks, "Well, what do you remember? What do you remember?" All I remember is when I hit the ground, is I saw black. And I'm thinking to myself, either I got knocked out completely, which wasn't the case, or I'm in the end zone looking at, the old black turf,
You're
we had
looking
at the
down.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when I realized, like, I'm seeing black and I got the ball here, and then all of a sudden the crowd goes crazy, I'm like, that's a touchdown. And then by then everybody's, hitting my head and slapping and
Yeah.
high-fiving and the whole place is going nuts. And then, we kicked the extra point to go up one.
Mhm.
Um, I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive. To score first catch to be a 50-yard touchdown against Notre Dame. Um, and that's like I said, I mean, to this day, people still talk about that catch. They replay it on, ESPN Classic and all the different stuff. Um, but yeah, that was definitely the play that put me on the map and kind of led to my career at Vanderbilt and a lot of other fun, good times.
Well, Todd, the way you describe it, I know looking back now, you've lived with it for so many years, but you were an 18-year-old, I assume, freshman, had been on campus and been going to class for a couple of weeks, and you're describing it as if you're a fifth year senior. And my question to you is, when did you have the ability to slow your heart rate down, to process the game at a rate unlike a pure freshman where you're trying to drink from a fire hose mentality, but you're able to process like a vet? Did it just come to you early on, or was it something that developed over time?
Um, I honestly think that it's something that I've kind of always possessed, and I think that was part of the reason why I was able to make it in the NFL. I came in the NFL as an undrafted guy, and I don't think anybody ever thought that I would make it even in the NFL. So I just always had that ability to, I think, get in the right position and spatially put myself in the right area to make a play. And then whenever given the opportunity, and I don't know if it was just from a mental standpoint or preparation standpoint or how you would just, I was always able to make that play. Um, and I think that really, those couple things were probably the thing that really set me apart. Especially when you get up in the NFL level, I was never as athletic as some of those guys. I mean, every year it seemed like they drafted a kid to replace me. Um, but I was always that kid that mentally was tough enough, could take, hits, could just always put myself in the right area. And when I had the opportunity, I was always I was always able to make, big plays when it mattered. Was always dependable. Coaches could always trust me. And I think that goes a long way to my longevity, especially in the NFL, to play for as long as what I did.
Well, you've probably lost count how many former teammates had all the athletic gifts in the world, just blow your mind at their abilities, but couldn't process mentally what they were having to do. Either they couldn't learn the playbook, or they couldn't jive, if you will, or be in sync with the rest of the offense or defense, depending on or the game was just too fast for them. And you probably many we've never even heard of because they just didn't stick in the NFL. And there were probably many teammates at Vanderbilt and high school as well. But that's the one thing to me that always was, and I've always wanted to ask you, was how do you, and maybe it's an inherent gift, how are you able to process enough quickly enough to be able to just let the game come to you instead of you pressing, so to speak, on that level?
Yeah, and I think there's some guys that they talk about game speed, too as well, and I always felt like uh, I was one of those guys that maybe in practice wasn't the fastest, but when I got in the game, that adrenaline, I always felt like I had good game speed. I always was able to elevate. And instead of that adrenaline or that nerves working against you, I feel like that always worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of guys that probably doesn't happen. I think a lot of guys might tense up or might get nervous or might not run as free or maybe mentally can't process it fast enough, so it slows them down. But for me, I think that worked in the opposite for me, where it helped me play better. And I think that's just a skill set or a trait that you can't really coach it. It's just part of kind of what made me who I was as a player, and that translated into a successful college and pro career.
Todd, I want to welcome Darren Rothenberg, says to you hello, and Marcus Williams is in the house now.
Big Marcus, he's the man right there.
Fall of the season of 96. It's one thing to open the season with number 6 Notre Dame, and then the next game is number 13 Alabama, and again played them tough. It was a 10-point loss, and there's never slouches in the Vanderbilt schedule, of course. But my question to you is, as a freshman, having that kind of athletic responsibilities, how were you able to handle the other parts of life, meaning academics? If you had any social, you had to get your rest. You had all these priorities. Had you, as a kid growing up at home, were you regimented, or were you having to learn that first semester on campus?
Well, I think, growing up, I was regimented. And part of that was playing multiple sports. I never got a break. I would go straight from one sport to the next sport to the next sport to the next sport. My dad was very almost militaristic with making us have summer jobs and making us work. So, you really had to balance your schedule between being able to get your academics and sports and then work and everything else. So I think, that kind of set the foundation. I also think, as a freshman, there were a lot of our other freshmen that probably questioned why, I didn't go out as much, or I always said, hey, I have to stay in and study, and I was, as a freshman, I was probably a little bit of a dud, so, or not a dud, but, just, I was more focused on the fact that, hey, I am playing, I gotta get rest. I gotta be there, to make sure that I'm not going out, 2 nights before a game and it's going to affect my playing. Where, some of the other guys, and we had some freshmen that played, I wasn't the only one in our class that, saw playing time, but I think it was more about, my focus was more on being the best, player and best at what I could be. And I think that's what drove me to, every year. And then even in the NFL, to be so like regimented or focused on what I needed to do. And I wasn't willing to put, say, my party lifestyle or something else in front of what I needed to get done.
Well, I was just going to say it would have been very easy for you as a freshman starter in the SEC to just live it up, go around campus and off campus and, do you know who I am kind of mentality. You had to have a little maturity in there as well, because with all of our recruiting classes, we all know those guys who just lasted a semester or maybe a year because they just weren't disciplined enough, and they wanted to live that lifestyle. So I guess you saw that and lived or saw the necessity to keep those priorities in order.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just more about who I am, too, as well. I don't, I love, going out just like everybody else, but I'm never gonna put that in front of my team or my responsibilities that I have.
What was the transition like from Dowhauer to Coach Woody the next year? Because I never played for either man, but every guy who's been on this show has commented about how different their personalities were, how different their regime and their staff and their approach to the sport, and how they treated the team as a whole. So share a little bit about that transition for you and what you went through.
Well, I mean, Woody was a lot more likable, had a, great personality, always wanted to do kind of what was best for you. So that was it was a refreshing kind of, I think, change, when Woody came on board. And I think, the one thing that that I think every player will tell you, um, at least for me, we felt like legitimately every year we gotten a little bit better, and then like this is going to be our year. Even though say the first 3 seasons we weren't, probably as successful, but my senior year, we go 5-6. We had the Kentucky game where, I think we're down by 2. We had the ball driving in, thinking, all right, field goal wins the game for us. And then, we end up having a fumble. But, if we win that game, we go 6-5 and technically would be bowl eligible. So I feel like, the mindset was always, we're constantly improving. And I think Woody did a really good job of helping, drive that mindset. And like I said, by our senior year, we had some better players, even though we never got quite over the hump. We had a good team that year.
Well, I was going to say that year, you, Lamont Turner, Ansley Battles, and Jeff Barnett were the captains on that team. And we went through, there was a stretch there where you guys won 3 out of 4. You beat Northern Illinois, Ole Miss in overtime, beat the pants off of Duke, and then came back 2 weeks later and beat Citadel. And then 2 weeks after that, beat South Carolina. And it's the South Carolina game I really wanted to ask you about. And I don't know if you have any vivid memories, but that was an odd score, 11-10 win that gave you guys your 5th win of the year. Does that game ring a bell at all?
Yeah, I mean, that was actually a tough game. I felt like on that particular one, I felt like we didn't actually play as well as what we could have. I felt like we going into that game, we felt like this is definitely a game we could win. The Ole Miss game was the one that I think probably I have more vivid memories of, just because it was down there. I think I scored the touchdown to send it into overtime, and then our other tight end Elliot Carson ended up scoring the game winner. So which is debatable, which one's more important, whether my score to put it in overtime or Elliot's to win. Which
well, you know what EC will say. I've already asked him on this show, but no offense. It was definitely his, not yours.
Yeah, of course. So
he can say that conveniently 2/3 of the way across the country now in Denver. So,
right. No, but but that game to me was probably, and I think Ole Miss was a higher ranked team at the time than what South Carolina was, maybe at least in my brain it was. So I felt like that was kind of the bigger upset. People talk about what was your most memorable SEC win, and that Ole Miss win in overtime was definitely the one.
Yeah, that's a big time win. And Harold Lurchus says yo-yo.
Yeah, good old Harold.
Talk a little bit. Talk a little bit about the transition from receiver to tight end. And did your body change? Did your mind have to change? Was it something that you look forward to doing, or was it something that you were you pushed back a little bit?
So really it was kind of a little bit of a natural progression. Every year I just kept getting a little bit bigger. And then my junior year was kind of really the turning point of it. I blew my ACL out my junior year. And back then ACL surgery was not to say it's a full 100% guaranteed you're going to come back and be, the same player. Like nowadays it's like, okay, you tore your ACL, 4 months later you'll be fine.
Right.
But back then it was a little bit of a change, and the coaches at that point had kind of said, hey, we think that because of your size and if you use this time to get in the weight room a little bit, and I don't think they were quite sure I was going to come back just as fast. And they were like, do you want to be known as a slow receiver, or do you want to maybe be known as a tight end that can still move and do the stuff you do. So that was kind of a natural progression where I was like, yeah, I'll do whatever's best for the team. And going into that senior year, that second tight end was more like a move H-back. Tennessee Titans back then were running that with like a Frank Wycheck type position. And so for me, I was like, yeah. And with Elliott being our other like main tight end, it was just a natural progression for me to really step in and kind of help the team in that role. So it ended up paying off because I would have probably never played in the NFL as a receiver. So to be able to use that year to kind of transition into a different mindset and really learning how to block, at least inside and more in the line of scrimmage, kind of set me up for success, in that transition going into the NFL.
Did you, when you were learning the position, did you pattern your game after anybody in particular?
I mean, realistically, and just being local in Tennessee there, watching Wycheck play and in that kind of more move H-back tight end type role, he was kind of the guy that I would kind of, mirror or look at. And and I'm not saying that, obviously he was really good. So I was just trying to do the best I could.
You were born a little too soon or too early for tight end you. How awesome is it now that all those pros come to Vanderbilt's campus and that our guys on the roster can interact and learn from them?
It is. It's an awesome thing. And I think the tight end position, definitely has evolved. When I first came out, if you couldn't inline block and down block a defensive end on power, you weren't going to play in the NFL.
Right.
Nowadays, heck, if you can't split out and you can't get open and run routes and whatever, you're not going to play as a tight end in the NFL. It's not like they put you down and just let you block the whole time.
Yeah.
So I think the whole position as a whole has definitely changed and morphed into what it is now. And watching the guys play now that are in the NFL, those guys are so much more stinking athletic and bigger and more rangy, than I ever was. I think when I did it, I kind of did it with a little bit of toughness and grit. And, obviously my ability to play special teams was probably even the bigger component to my NFL success.
Well, Todd, it's such a different position now than it was when you were coming up through the NFL with all the rule changes, et cetera. But Todd, Jason Smith says to tell you hello.
What's up, Jason?
Jason lives in the Birmingham area, and I'm fortunate to get to see him too. Let's see who else is rolled in. We got Kenny Cole. Hey, Kenny, out of Huntsville. And Joe People said he met Big Todd. Man, you're just dropping names now, Joe. He said he met you at a New Year's Eve party at Warren Sapp's house.
And I was there 100%. I'm not gonna lie. Warren actually invited me to that party. And they back then, being a small guy from a small town in Indiana, I had never heard of it's like Louis the 14th cognac or whatever. The bottle itself was like $3,000. Sat pulls me and was like, Jody, he was like, you ever had this before? I go, man, I would never think to buy a $3,000 bottle of liquor. He was like, get you a glass. He was like, it's on me. So I had a glass of that with Sap that night, and I'll never forget that one. Probably the first time and the only time I've ever had that. So,
Todd, you and Trent Sherfield have a lot in common in my eyes, in that you come into the pros, you're not expected to make any teams, and you stick around because you have made yourself invaluable. And I know I know that you started out with the Bucs, then the Jags, and then what was then called the Redskins. But take us a little bit. I have a couple other questions about Vanderbilt. I really want to get into the NFL part for a minute. Take us into the experience that most of us never get to have, in that you're making contact, I guess, with the GM at the Bucs or the coach, I'm not sure who. And then how do you go from being undrafted to making the squad to having a very productive career all those years? You had alluded to it a little bit earlier, but
yeah, so part of that transition was at the time the OC that was for the Titans, or he might not have been the OC, but he might have been just one of the position coaches, was Les Steckel. And Les was a big part of that, two tight end system. So he actually went to Tampa to become the offensive coordinator. And believe it or not, Les's son was on the golf team at Vanderbilt. And so in part of that, well, I had a couple different other teams that were like, hey, free agency, come here, come here, come here. Part of that speech from Coach Steckel was, hey, I've seen you play. He was like, you remind me of what Frank Wycheck was coming out. And to me, that was a big thing of like, I told my agent at the time, I'm like, and with Tony Dungy was our coach at the time, and I've heard really good things about Tony. I said, I think Tampa might be my best opportunity to maybe make a roster because they had already talked about, hey, we're going to keep 4 tight ends because we're going to use this 2 tight end system a lot. That's what we're going for. So coming into training camp, I think I was the 7th or 8th guy on the roster, just at tight end depth chart. And our very first meeting we had, our coach Tony got up and said, any rookies want to make this team, this guy, and he points over to Joe Marciano, our special teams coach, said, you need to prove it to him that you can play special teams. Well, that very first meeting resonated to me of whatever that man asked me to do, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it better than anybody else. And really that whole first couple years, the sole reason I made the teams was because I could play special teams. I could run down on kickoff, play kickoff return, and really had the ability to play multiple positions. I had a game late in my career on punt protection where I played, wing some, I played tackle. And by that time, they were kind of moving me down where I was playing guard, which, is right next to our long snapper. And part of that was I knew the protection so well. Our long snapper at the time was a little bit older and couldn't move his feet as well. But I would always protect him. I'd always, make protection changes and help him and everything else. And he was he'd say I was like his security blanket, being right next to him. But in that one game, we had a couple of guys get hurt. So just in punt pro, I started the game in a guard, had to go to right tackle, took one snap over there. We had another kid go down. They put me at left wing, and then our PP went down. So I finished the game as a personal protector for 2 snaps. So you think in a series of a game, obviously that means we weren't playing very well because we punted like 7 times.
I was going to say, how many points?
Yeah, exactly. Not a great game for us. But in the course of that, to have a special teams coach and Danny Smith, who's still in the league right now in Pittsburgh, to have the confidence in me to know that guy can play any position that I put him in. And I think that was part of that, longevity. Coaches were like, listen, we trust him. We know if we put him in, he's going to do his job. Now, physically, at that point, was I slowing down a little bit? Could I not run yeah. But because of the mental, capacity and capabilities I had, that helped, keep that longevity that I had in the league.
And it's also, you had that Vanderbilt in you. They knew you were a smart dude.
Yeah, well, yeah, a lot of back in the day, this was a common question, and I don't know how this kept popping up, but there was always the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and everybody asked, well, who would you say is your phone a friend? And literally every NFL player I think that I ever played with, I got asked that question was like Todd Yoder. We'll call him up because he's gonna know it. So
well, you shouldn't have scored a 45 on the Wonderlic or whatever it was back then, but you get to Tampa and Shelton is already on the squad.
Yeah,
he'd been there for a couple of seasons. Talk a little bit about that teammate, Shelton Quarles dynamic.
So obviously, Shelton was a great teammate. We had a good group, and it was funny, even as a rookie, before every game when we would warm up, when we would do our team stretch lines, the offense would kind of be on one side and the defense would be on the other. But when we would break team stretch and we'd go to do like our individual warm-ups or drills, Shelton and I had always made a deal that we would kind of crisscross and always give each other like a little high five or hey, let's go get them. And I still remember that today, that me and him would always find each other before, once we broke that stretch line. And just that kind of confidence and really seeing him too, where he transitioned kind of early from a special teams guy into really a predominant starter, for us or in Tampa for a long time. But just kind of gave me that confidence that that was kind of the track that maybe, hopefully I could, pattern after, to where, eventually maybe get a chance to play a little bit more tight end, which I did as my year, career progressed.
I posted some of the photos of you in the different uniforms, different franchises you were playing with. And I have to ask, who were the inspirations for the different hairstyles?
Well, that's a good question. A couple of the facial hair, different, things were more like a bad beard competition, which the Civil War, like General Sideburns lamb chops was always a
That's
favorite
right.
of mine. And believe it or not, back then I had actually had hair, so I could grow it out a little bit, and then I kind of did the mohawk as a little bet or a challenge because people said I wouldn't do it. And then I ended up scoring a touchdown with it. And then I was like, well, I'm going to keep it. Then the next week I scored another one with it. And then I'm like, all right, I'm going to keep this until I don't score. I scored a third week with it. And by that time, our coach was kind of like, yo, the Mohawks got to go. And I told him, I said, Coach, I've scored 3 weeks in a row with it. So finally, the fourth game, I didn't score. And he kind of said, are we getting rid of it? I was like, yeah, I'll shave it off. And then what that was really that started the, the bald head thing. And I was like, I look pretty, sleek and more aerodynamic with the bald head. So that kind of led to this hairstyle that I still have today. So.
Oh, that's awesome, because there's a great picture with I don't know if your hair was naturally blonde back then or you bleached it, but when you're in the Redskins, you had the mohawk that it's quite blonde. It's a short mohawk, but it's very visible. It's a great photo.
So when I was obviously, once I got out, I coached high school football down here in Clearwater, Florida, and a lot of our players were like, Coach, we have all these pictures of you with mohawks and crazy hair and whatever. How come you won't do that? And I was like, well, we're our head of school would probably fire me if I came in with a mohawk. So we were leading up to homecoming week, and our school colors were blue and white. I was at Calvary Christian High School, and a couple of weeks before, I'd asked my head of school. I was like, "Hey, I go, what would you think, for the pep rally for homecoming, if I brought the mohawk back?" And he was like, "I would love it." I said, "All right." So I kind of let my hair grew out a little bit, where nobody was really paying that close attention, because I was just kind of letting it go. And the night before, I ended up shaving it, and I bleached it to. I mean, it was a real nice mohawk, probably one of the best ones I've had. And all day during school, I wore a hat, and I ended up having to wear it backwards because I had to cover up the tail part of the mohawk. And everybody's like, Coach, like why are you wearing your hat backwards? I was like, oh, it's good luck today. I'm like, we're gonna get after him or whatever.
Yeah.
So when we were in the pep rally, they give me the mic at the end of it and want me to give a big, rah-rah speech. And so, I do it and I'm trying to pump everybody up. And at the very end, I gave like kind of like the mic drop moment where I told all the guys, I'm like, guys, I'm like, you guys have always asked for the mohawk. I go, and I promised you that if, we ever got in a big game and we needed a win, I'd bring it back. And I was like, and today's your day. And I pull the hat off and it's there. And everybody just went nuts. The whole student body, all the teachers, everybody. I literally just dropped the mic and walked off stage. And everybody's like, did you have that all day? I go, yeah, I had it the whole time under the hat. But we ended up winning the game too, which made it a little bit better as opposed to pulling out the mohawk and losing.
Did you coach with the mohawk?
Oh yeah, no, I had sideline. I had the headset. The
Awesome.
headset kind of squished it down though. But no, there's a picture in the paper of me and saying like Yoder brings the mohawk back because they had seen it online or whatnot, and leads Calvary to victory or whatever. So I had always asked my head of school though, who is a little bit older. I was like, any chance I could ever get you to rock the mohawk? And he was like, I tell you what, he's like, we win a state title. He was like, I'll do it for you. We made it a couple rounds deep in the playoffs. We never won states, but I still to this day want to see him with the mohawk. So
that'd be epic. I want to kind of come forward. We've got a few more minutes. You now have a son who plays college ball at Lehigh. You've been through what he's now going through. How do you take the coach mentality off and be the dad? How has that transition been for you over the last few years?
Well, it's been part of the reason why I did kind of step away from coaching was I did want to just, be able to watch him and not have to worry about, coaching and trying to just, be a dad and a coach. But it's hard at times. I mean, when you see him, make a mistake or do something, you want to be like, hey, next time do this. But he's a different player than I was. He plays a different position. So I think there's a little bit of differences in our game. But I mean, really, it just comes down to being proud. When you watch your own son get a chance to go out and play and score touchdowns and do kind of like what you used to get to do, and then now being able to do it at a collegiate level and going as a freshman, kind of like in a situation where I was, and get a chance to earn a starting role. And he got Patriot League Player of the Week, 2 games. So and to be a crucial part of their offense, it was awesome to be able to go to the games and watch him play this year.
And wasn't he also nominated for a national award as well?
Yeah, he was nominated for the Jerry Rice Award, which is the FCS's like top freshman player, in the whole country. So just to see that nomination was very cool in itself. And same kind of scenario with him. Lehigh wasn't very successful this year, so I patterned like kind of the situation I was at Vanderbilt. You go in as a freshman, you have success, you get a chance to play. They went 2-9 this year, so they have a lot of room for improvement. And I'm hoping that he can kind of be the cornerstone of maybe that program or that team, coming back to a little bit of prominence, because Lehigh in the Patriot League has had, many successful seasons and years, and they, kind of been in a little bit of a downturn. But I'm hoping that he can kind of be part of the resurgence, and I'm looking forward to watching him, the next 3 years.
I guess you and the family have that route, that plane route memorized by now, coming out of Florida into Philadelphia. But Todd, I want to ask you, and this may be an unfair question, so I apologize ahead of time. And I didn't mean to overlook the fact that you're a Super Bowl champion with the Buccaneers. And obviously that comes with its own emotions, its own experiences, its own memories. But is there a comparison as a parent seeing your child achieve goals and setting goals and working hard compared to the achievements that you had during your days coming up? I know that's a terrible question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think just so much pride, I mean, I think, winning the Super Bowl for me was a great, me moment. I think the thing about that experience that I probably remember most, and it's one of the pictures that I have out here. My father was a very say stern guy, but didn't show a lot of emotion, growing up. And when we won that game, I jumped the stadium wall to run up to where my family was. And I got a picture of me hugging my dad after we won, and I've never seen a grown-ass man in so many tears. And I literally have the picture of him just like pouring tears as I'm hugging him.
I thought you were referring to yourself.
No, well, this is back when we won. No, I was so excited. I was great. But to see a guy that I don't think I've ever seen really cry or never really, got emotional, but just to see that in him kind of relates to the same thing of, now when I see my son play. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure. Sure.
In that whole experience, I mean, that's one of my most memorable pictures. I mean, I have a picture of me holding the trophy and all the different stuff,
Yeah.
but that picture of me and my dad probably sums up the whole, Super Bowl experience. And then I snuck my brother and my wife down on the field, and they were down, with everybody when we were shooting the confetti off and whatnot. But to be able to see, to be able to experience that with my own son now, to see him, score touchdowns and be successful, it's amazing. And a lot of the players, so my wife is a Vanderbilt graduate as well. She's one of the best lacrosse players, ever to play at Vanderbilt, and a lot of the guys, that are probably commenting all remember her and know her. But to be honest with you, in our family, she's probably the most athletic one.
Mhm.
And if she was on here right now, she'd be sure to tell you guys that. But so realistically, I mean, in our family right now, even though quote I have a Super Bowl, it would probably be questionable. My son's probably going to tell you he's faster than I am, which he is, and my wife's going to say she was a better athlete and an All-American and all this different stuff. So really, I'm like the third best athlete in the family, and I won this stinking Super Bowl. If that kind of
That's
puts it
so
all in
funny.
perspective.
Does it surprise you at all to see Brad Johnson on social media with the Big Bad Brad campaign and throwing the balls and stuff like that he does?
No, he's a classic, man. You can talk about nicknames. We just call him the Bowl. So that's but he's a trip. I enjoyed playing with him. I got to play with several different quarterbacks, and each one of them completely different in their own way. Brad probably threw the softest ball. And when I
Mhm.
say soft, it's just a nice, soft, easy spiral. And he really used his lower body to kind of get power behind the ball. Didn't have like a great arm, but just was more of a field general type of guy. Then I played with Byron Leftwich when we were in Jacksonville, and that sucker would throw a 90-mile-an-hour fastball at you, standing 2 feet from your face.
Mhm.
So it just complete and had an arm that could, I mean, he could throw it, I don't even know how far, 80 yards or
Yeah.
whatever. So it just, each one of those guys has their own little, special talents or special skills.
It's and not to get too deep into the woods, but with the position you played, I don't know if Leftwich throwing one way and Johnson throwing another, or lefty and a righty, you have to get used to the ball coming out of their hands for your, I guess, your hand-eye adjustments. And I guess over your career, you just figure that stuff out. You just figure that stuff out over time.
Yeah, you do. I mean, everybody's got like a little bit different spiral, or a little bit like right as it gets on you, the ball might tail like
Mhm.
slightly differently as it gets to you. And, you just kind of get used to it. It kind of, not say second nature, but the more, and they talk about that chemistry, between a quarterback and receiver or certain people. And it definitely is a real thing, especially at the upper levels.
Well, Todd, we're almost at the very end. I want to circle back to Vanderbilt and your experience there for just a minute or so. Playing football or any varsity sport at Vanderbilt is unique. We're in the SEC, high academics, et cetera, smallest school in the conference. But there's also the academic pressures. There's also the social pressures if you're a social type person. My question, or where I want to go with this, is you have two different types of experiences from most of the guests who've been on the show. Some have stayed in that Vanderbilt, excuse me, in that McGugan bubble, that just the confines from a social and academic and athletic standpoint of just being within the athletics, the athletes, and didn't socialize much, didn't network that much, and they were perfectly content with that. Then you have the others whose experience is more out into the campus and networking and those things. Share a little bit about your experience about dealing with the other students. Did you network? Were you in a fraternity? Did you do other social things? Or was really more the football and McGugan experience more your experience?
I mean, for me, it was probably more just the football and the McGugin, and I think part of that was the fact that I met my wife there early. So being that she was another athlete, we frankly just hung out with mostly the other athletes, and I think there was probably a little bit of a uh, commonality there or common bond that a lot of the athletes shared, and you know part of that was, in the area that I grew up to, um, I think sometimes, I just think you feel more comfortable hanging with people that are kind of from that same, I don't want to say upbringing or whatnot. And I was a little different because a lot of the athletes that were there at the time, uh, were in Peabody College side of campus, and they were in HOD, which is Human and Organizational Development. I was one of the kind of crazy people that I was actually a chemistry major coming out of Vanderbilt. So I don't know how many chemistry majors you've had on the show, but there might be one. So
You might be the first in 4 years.
yeah. So I was one of the sole people that was at that time, even from our group. I think we had a couple kids in engineering. We might have had another kid that was in when arts and science over with us, but all of my class load, I dealt with general students. I don't really didn't take a whole lot of classes, with other athletes. Maybe early when we had like some common classes, but once I got into my main track, I was with all the other chemistry kids. So that was a little different experience where I think my academic track put me with a different type of individual. And that's part of it.
Probably a much smaller sized person as well.
Yes, much smaller size, and it was a very different experience. And on the academic side, and just another story that comes to mind, our last kind of presentation we had to do, we actually had to give a presentation about our senior thesis or senior project in front of the whole like kind of science department, all the chemistry people, and they do give an award, out of that department, and I actually ended up winning the award, and it wasn't because my research was any good or because anything. It's just I actually could stand up and talk to people. So when you're giving the presentation, people are like, "Wow, that was amazing! Really clear, descriptive, could talk in a whole room full of people." Some of these other kids, just locked up and couldn't speak or couldn't describe, what they'd really spent the time doing, and that was something I was good with public speaking or talking to groups of kids, and I think that transitioned to even when I was coaching and speaking in the kids, and even in the NFL, going to elementary schools or going to places for charity groups and getting up in front of people and talking. So I was kind of always had that ability to talk out in groups of people, and yeah, it was that biggest joke was I was probably the worst chemistry student Vanderbilt ever had, but they gave me the award that year. So
Well, you're used to performing in front of thousands, and I
yeah,
realize you have your helmet on and you're not giving speeches to them. I took one of the summers I was at Vanderbilt, I took a public speaking class, and it was only the kids in the class and the professor. There's like 10 of us. It's not like we went out in public and had big audiences. And I got myself so worked up over this 3-minute speech that I threw up right before I was supposed to speak outside the hall, got it out of my system and went in and gave it. But I was with a baseball player, and he's like, it's as if it's as if you're competing.
yeah,
And
playing a game.
the audience, and it flipped the switch
Yeah.
just like that. Here's my last question for you. We play team sports all through childhood, all through high school. Some of us get to play in college, and even fewer get to play in the pros. But I want you to share why playing a team sport and having teammates and still being in touch with some of those teammates has been important to you over these years.
I just think it's the relationships. I think even in the workforce today, I got to rely on the guy, beside me each side of it. to contribute to really, helping a company or helping a situation. And I feel like, even at Vanderbilt, I mean, to be able to struggle with loss and be able to get back up and continue to push forward towards a common goal. I think team sports teaches that, to kids. And, and really for me at Vanderbilt, it was probably the first time that I'd ever met kids from different areas of the country, kids from Texas, kids from, Georgia, kids from all over and completely different ethnic backgrounds and upbringings and everything else. And to get all that and mesh that and still, be great teammates to each other. I think that's the real beauty behind it, and really beauty behind the experience of being able to play at Vanderbilt.
I love the fact that, and tell me if this is your experience, you're part of a group text. Maybe it's some of your Vanderbilt guys, maybe it's some of the guys in the pros. And it wouldn't matter what you put in that group text. It could be one word, it could be an event that you all shared. And there's just tons of laughs, tons of good feelings that you guys have shared. And it's just a common bond with you guys. And that's what I love about team sports and have enjoyed all these years. So I know that all the fellas who've popped in tonight to share a little love with you and say hello, I know those teammates still are rooting for you. So Todd, thank you for being here tonight. I really have enjoyed our conversation.
No, I enjoyed it too. And, thanks for having me. And for all you former teammates out there, appreciate you. And, we'll catch you guys later.
Stick around while I sign off. I got something to share with you.
Okay.
Guys, keep coming back. I've got Commodores scheduled all the way into the summer already. So we've got some great stories to share. And please keep coming back on Tuesday nights. You guys anchor down.